You know that specific feeling when you finally buy the thing you've wanted for months. You track the shipping, you unbox it, you hold it in your hands, and then 20 minutes later, the dopamine hit fades, and you're just bored. Now, imagine that feeling applied to your entire existence. That was my reality. I went looking for religion and ended up crashing into a relationship that defied every logical metric I lived by. But before we get to the shift, you have to understand the trap. I didn't just stumble into success, I hunted it down. I was the architect of a life designed to make other people jealous. I woke up at 4:45 a.m., not because I wanted to, but because that's what winners do. My nervous system ran on a toxic blend of double-shot espresso and raw ambition. I spent my days maneuvering through high-stakes boardrooms, analyzing spreadsheets, and closing deals that involved more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. On paper, I was the protagonist of a success story. I had the corner office with the floor-to-ceiling glass, the kind that looks out over the city skyline like you own it. I had the sleek, architectural apartment filled with furniture that cost more than my parents' first car. I had the network, the reputation, the momentum. I had checked every single box that society promised would deliver happiness. But here is the brutal truth they don't put in the brochures. The silence at the top is deafening. In the quiet moments, usually in the back of an Uber at 10 p.m. or staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., the facade would crack. A terrifying question would echo in that silence. Is this it? It wasn't just boredom. It was a hollowness. It felt like a physical ache in the center of my chest, a void that was actively consuming me. My apartment wasn't a home, it was a showroom. It was sterile, cold, and designed to impress strangers rather than comfort the human being living inside it. Even my friendships were transactional. We were allies in a war for status. We'd sit at five-star restaurants, clinking crystal glasses, talking about market trends and exit strategies. But we never asked the real questions. We never asked, "Are you okay?" We just assumed the answer was yes, because the bank accounts were full. I was starving to death at a banquet. So, like any logical person, I tried to fix the internal problem with external solutions. I doubled down, I chased a bigger bonus, I booked a more exotic vacation to a place with unpronounceable names. I bought a faster car, thinking the adrenaline would drown out the silence, and for a moment, it worked. The new toy gave me a hit of serotonin, but the come down was always brutal. The emptiness always returned, and every time it came back, it was heavier, darker, and more demanding. I remember standing on my balcony one Tuesday night, looking at the grid of city lights below me, millions of people, millions of stories, and feeling completely detached from the human race. I was a ghost haunting my own life. The anxiety began to manifest physically. I'd be in the middle of a strategy meeting, and suddenly, my heart would hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was having panic attacks in bathrooms and then walking back out to lead teams. I read the self-help bestsellers. I sat through mindfulness seminars. I paid expensive therapists to analyze my childhood, but it all felt like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. I was treating the symptoms, but the disease was spiritual starvation. The crash happened on a Tuesday. It should have been the best day of my career. I had just closed a project that I'd poured 6 months of my life into. Sweat equity, sleepless nights, missed family events. My boss called me in, shook my hand, and told me the board was ecstatic. He slid a piece of paper across the desk with a bonus figure that was objectively life-changing. I walked out of that office, walked down the hall to the sound of applause, went into my office, and shut the door. And then, nothing. Absolute, terrified silence. The thrill lasted maybe 45 seconds. The emptiness that rushed back in was so violent it almost knocked the wind out of me. It was like scoring the winning goal in a stadium that had been empty for 50 years. What was the point? That night, I didn't go out to celebrate. I went home to that quiet, expensive apartment. I didn't turn on the lights. I stood in the dark, surrounded by the trophies of my success, and I finally admitted defeat. The weight of the hopelessness was crushing me. I sank to my knees on the cold, polished hardwood floor, not as a ritual, but because I physically couldn't stand up under the weight of my own soul anymore. I had run out of moves. I had run out of ambition. In that moment of total surrender, I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I spoke to the air. It wasn't a poetic prayer. It was a guttural, desperate plea. I whispered, "God, I don't even know if you're real. I don't know if you're a frequency, a force, or a fairy tale. But if you are there, I am drowning. I have everything the world says I need, and I have absolutely nothing. I am lost. If you're real, show me. I surrender." I stayed there, weeping, expecting silence. I expected the dark room to stay dark. But then, the atmosphere in the room shifted. I'm not talking about a hallucination. I'm talking about a tangible change in the density of the air. It wasn't a booming voice from the clouds. It was far more intense. It was a presence. A profound, heavy, enveloping peace descended on me. It felt like a weighted blanket for my soul. The frantic noise in my brain, the anxiety, the planning, the fear just cut out. Silence. Real stillness. In that stillness, I felt known. Not analyzed, not judged, but known. It was a sensation of overwhelming, unconditional love that washed over the shame of my ego and my failures. It was a signal piercing through the noise, saying, "You are seen. You are valued. You are mine." My logical brain couldn't compute this data. There was no variable I could input to explain it, but my soul recognized it immediately. It was a homecoming. I realized I had been an orphan in the universe, trying to buy my way into belonging, and suddenly, I was a child again. I wasn't finding a religion, I was meeting a person. When I woke up the next morning, the optics of the world had changed. The colors seemed sharper, the contrast higher. The heavy cloak of dread that I used to wear like a suit was gone. In its place was a quiet, humming joy. I went to work, but the desperation was gone. I looked at my job and realized, this is what I do. It is not who I is. The frantic need for validation evaporated. I looked at my colleagues, people I had previously viewed as competitors or stepping stones, and I saw human beings carrying their own burdens. I started asking real questions. How is your daughter? How are you handling the stress? I stopped networking and started connecting. This wasn't a one-off dopamine hit. It was the beginning of a dialogue. I started reading the Bible, not as a history textbook, but as a letter from this being I had encountered. Prayer stopped being a last resort and became a continuous conversation, a constant uplink to that source of peace. My purpose realigned. It wasn't about building my own kingdom anymore. It was about reflecting that insane love I had felt on my living room floor. Now, here's the catch, and this is crucial. My life didn't become perfect. I still have bad days. I still lose deals. I still get frustrated in traffic. But the foundation has changed. Before, I was building on sand, and every wave threatened to destroy me. Now, I have an anchor. When I stumble, I'm not crushed by shame. I'm caught by grace. The emptiness I tried to fill with Ferraris and accolades has been filled by a presence that money cannot buy. I look back at that guy standing on the balcony, terrified and alone, and I just want to hug him. He was looking for life in a graveyard. The connection I discovered wasn't a trophy I earned. It was a gift I finally stopped fighting long enough to receive. If you are reading this, and you feel that hollow ache, that suspicion that there must be more than the grind, I am telling you, that is not a flaw. That is a homing beacon. You were built for this connection. You don't need a cathedral, and you don't need a theology degree. You just need the honesty to say, help. I want to know, have you ever felt that specific kind of success-induced emptiness? Or are you searching for that signal right now? Tell me your story in the comments. Let's make this a real conversation. And if you want to go deeper into this journey of finding purpose beyond the paycheck, hit that subscribe button. We are just getting started.